Looks like so do we know we're ready? I think we are. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order tonight's listening session. We do have a quorum. For those people that want to speak, we would ask that you fill out a green sheet and then bring it up over to Margot, and then she'll make sure I get it. With the focus tonight on school start times and educational benefits to our students, it is appropriate that we take a moment to recognize the work of our educators and our staff. On behalf of the Edina School Board and the administration, we want to acknowledge the work that's being done in our district. We've asked a lot of our teachers, our staff, students, and community at large, from moving a 9th grade to the high school, to major construction, to projects, to programs and new technologies. We could never attempt to accomplish any of this high level of excellence that defines Edina without the guidance and support of our educators and staff. Edina teachers are educators, scholars, role models, innovators, and compassionate advocates, and today we want to take the time to recognize them. Our staff is second to none and the glue that keeps our district together. On behalf of the board and the district, I would like to thank our Edina Public School teachers and our staff for their work and its positive impact on the students in our greater school community. I would now like to welcome everyone again. This is our second listening session. We're excited to get input from the public. Before we start tonight's listening session, I want to go over a few parameters for tonight's session. First, we're going to begin by having Dr. Schultz just give a quick overview, and then we will then take comments from individuals. Again, green sheet makes it easier for us. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. I have a timer over there in Val Burke who's going to send me a signal when your 3 minutes are up, and then I will ask you to complete your thoughts. We ask that you do not comment on any individuals. If you have comments about specific individuals, please bring those to the attention of the superintendent directly. I'm going to call the names of the current, well, right now we don't have a lot of speakers. If we turn out to have a lot of speakers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the name of the first speaker as well as the second speaker so we can keep the process moving. We do ask that you do not applaud any of the speakers. It will take up time that we could otherwise use to listen to more people. So with that said, I would call Becky Peterson. Oh, yep, sorry.
So before we get started, we have, can we have all the 9th graders in the room stand up? Mr. Statham is here. Do you want to talk about why these people are standing up?
Yeah, part of one of our, each semester we do a public policy current events project for our U.S. government classes. These freshmen are all in U.S. government. And we are focusing on, in the second semester, how public input affects public policy making. So they're here to observe the input coming from the public and the effects on policy. And then they will write a project and analyze it, summarize it, analyze it, and turn that in by the end of the semester.
Great project for this. Welcome. Glad you're all here. I'm the superintendent, John Schultz, and in your notes, I'm civic-minded, educational leader. You have all that? I'm going to give a quick overview on how the school board is considering this decision and where this all originated. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Talk a little bit about the schedule that's being considered. Give you a quick overview on the process and the calendar that's coming up as the board proceeds to make this decision. Thank you, Sarah. As the school board continues to make its decision. So I'm going to go through this rather quickly just to get you grounded. So the school board is considering the research that's happening across the country that is telling school districts, especially high schools and middle schools, to have adolescents start later. I suppose we could ask the 9th graders in here what time they get up. I'm not going to do that. But we know that their sleep shifts. The research shows their sleep shifts into a later time. So this research is being considered as the school board's making this decision. And the National Sleep Foundation has been instrumental with its science in communicating the impact that sleep has on student engagement and attentiveness. So when a school district begins to ask this question about changing start times, there are variables that play into that. And course, the biggest variable is that interaction, that engagement that happens in school. But the other part is how do we then get students to school at the time we want them to start learning. So the school board over the last, since November, in addition to considering this research, they began to consider different schedules. And this is the current transportation schedule. And this just, whoops, shows the, there we go, the current schedule. You can see that we have Valley View and South View starting in the first tier, so that's a first run that the buses take. And just to look over there, I want you to pay attention to the numbers here. This is this particular tier of schools, the students we pick up for these 3 schools, takes 36 buses to do that. For the second tier, Normandale, OLG, and the high school, it takes 42 buses, and then the rest of the elementary schools, including the continuous progress schools, it takes 45 buses. This is a fiscal issue. This does cost money. The goal that we're trying to reach here as far as the budget target is 42 buses. So what we did as a school board and administrative team is to look at what can we do with schedules? What can we do with these transportation schedules? And one of them we looked at was a 2-tier schedule. A 2-tier schedule means that we're going to have 2 passes through the Edina School District to pick up kids. And we looked at this schedule and to see if we could start classes around 8 for 1 tier of schools and then at 9 for a 2nd tier of schools. And when we did that calculation to calculate how many buses it would take to transport this number of students, we found out it took 56 buses to do that for the first tier and 53 for the second. That's 11 buses over what our fiscal target is. And so then it begins, do you make this change and buy the buses? And after deliberation and looking at other schedules, the board landed on this schedule to consider. And and our administrative team are also bringing this forward as our recommendation. You can see that it takes 42 buses in each of the tiers. The elementary schools, start time is at 7:50. The high school, Normandale and OLG, is at 8:30. And our middle schools would be starting at 9:20. So after workshops and discussion, deliberation, calculations, we also played a little bit with the non-transportation zones. So sometimes they're called walking areas, to see if we can extend those to have less buses, to change those times, and we weren't able to manipulate that enough to get that to happen. So this is the schedule that we're putting forward. And this is the schedule that the board is considering and will consider, and you have the opportunity to respond and give viewpoints to the school board regarding it. So the process, the board's going to have another listening session on February 27th on this transportation option. School board also continues to take emails and reads them and records them. On February 26th, there will be a board discussion at their board meeting around start and end times. March 12th will be another board discussion, and then March 19th is the date when the board will make a decision on the start and end times. So with that, we're going to invite you forward to provide your perspective, your viewpoint, and your thoughts on the start time proposal. As Chair Wallen-Friedman indicated, there's sheets in the back to fill out. Speakers will be given 3 minutes to speak. If your view was expressed by another and you want to reiterate it, please try to do so in an abbreviated fashion to make sure that we get everybody here to give the chance to express their viewpoint. And then, as always, let's model and respect our commitment to a real good civil discourse tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Wallen-Friedman to conduct the listening session.
All right, thank you very much. And our first person tonight is Becky Peterson. Welcome. Grab a microphone.
On? No. It might not be smart enough to work. Hi. Okay.
All right, there we go.
Couldn't get my computer to work, I couldn't get my notes to print, so I had some like witty intros. I compared start times to lima beans, and I got none of it. So I'm going to just sort of try to say a few of the things that I had scrolled down because I've been here before and you guys kind of know what I think. My concern with the choices are that I think that neither of them are good, neither of them are great, and I don't know that we can get some other choices, but that's what I would ask you to consider is if we can get something else. I think they're both extremes. I think 7:50 is too early. I think 9:25 or 9:20 for middle school is too late, and it's too late for elementary school. I'm living it right now, and it's totally fine with me, but it's too late. I think for the elementary to consider, I know it's been brought up, the safety issue of having kids out early, but I think you have to think about more than just darkness, but it's colder when it's earlier. The snow plows haven't come through. I've been watching to see when the plows come on my streets. They're not plowed yet, or they're coming through. And if you ever watch elementary school children at a bus stop, they're lunatics. They slide into the street on sleds. They do crazy things. And now when we mix in darker and plows and things, I think it's not safe. So I'm very concerned that those first bus pickups would be 7 o'clock, even perhaps earlier when you talk about the choice program schools. I'm concerned about when we talk about things being better for working families, that we have decided that working family looks only like a parent that works from 7:30 to 4:30, and we don't consider other working makeups, and that would include parents who now have kids finished at 2:25 in the afternoon. That's very early, and for those that need aftercare, that can be 3.5 hours of aftercare. That's over half the day. More than half the time they've spent in a classroom is now in a gymnasium. Versus maybe an hour before, an hour after. I think that split up seems a little bit more reasonable, in my opinion. But 3.5 hours in a gym feels very long to me. I would ask about some things that might be considered in terms of the buses. First, bus efficiency. From my house, I can see 3 bus stops. I could get to all of them within 20 seconds. I'm not saying I want my kid to walk down the block if they can be at the end of my driveway, but I sure want them to walk down the block if it makes us need less buses or go faster or things like that. So I wonder about if we have too many stops going on. I wonder about the capacity of the buses, especially high school buses, because I know that we have a lot of people driving that never actually take the bus, and I wonder what we can do with that. I wonder about charging for using buses for choice programs. We could have vouchers and things for people who are on lunch programs and things like that so that it's not unfair. And my children are in a choice program, to be clear, but maybe when you're in a choice program, that's something. I just think there's more to consider. I know this is totally incoherent, and it would have been a little more coherent if my printer worked. So that's all. I just would hope that you'd consider maybe a little less extreme. So thanks.
Good evening, Board Chair, Superintendent, Board members. I'm Dr. Brian Bass, Principal of a pre-K through 8th grade school in St. Paul Public Schools. Served 12 years as a principal, and during all of those years I've served in the capacity with children who are at the secondary level. I am in support of the recommendation that is up here with the middle school start times moving back. And I can't emphasize enough in the deliberation that's going on with the board that putting our children's health and their academics at the front of this conversation is what should be driving the decision versus extracurricular activities. I think the other points will be raised or have been made. I have submitted a letter as of Sunday evening, so you should have that in your board packets. I did ask my 7th grader at Valley View to write her letter because I think it's important to have student voices at the table when thinking about the decisions that we're making. So Dear school, this is from Estelle, 7th grader at Valley View. Dear board members, as an EBA, Edina Basketball Association basketball player, and being at the older end of my EBA travel basketball career, my team is given the later practices the majority of the time. On most nights, I get home from practice anywhere from 8:45 to 9:15. If I don't have any homework left and I don't need to shower, I'm in bed by 9:30 or 9:45. This gives me about 8.5 hours of sleep, 9 hours tops. But sometimes my brain can't shut off and I can't fall asleep till 10:15, 10:30. Most mornings I'm a zombie, and I have a really hard time focusing until about period 1 or period 2 ends. In conclusion, the middle school's early start time makes it hard for me and my teammates to get enough sleep. Even a start time of 8:30 would have a dramatic impact on my ability to focus and retain what I'm learning. So that's from the voice of a 7th grader, and mom or dad did not mess with that. That's her writing. And so I just want to underscore that I think the focus of the conversation has to be on our children's health and academics and what's going to put them in the best situation. So I do hope that we are able to, at the end of this, move the middle school start times back past 8:30. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Amy Gilbertson. And after Amy will be Patrick Dow. Welcome.
Welcome. I'm sorry. Is it?
You're on.
Thank you. I'm a teacher at Southview Middle School. I'm passionate about middle school and the learning success of those students. Middle school learners are not being honored in the present proposal, in my opinion, for these reasons. Student access to learning facilities, for example. High school athletics want to be allowed to enter the building prior to the end of the school day. I feel that this is distracting to the students from learning and making them feel uncomfortable in their space. For example, changing in the locker rooms. If we had swimming, diving, synchro in there and I had 6th graders in my PE class, it would be hard for them. High school athletics wants to be allowed to warm up on the sides while middle school PE classes is wrapping up. Again, distracting the learning from meeting their learning targets. The end of the hour is prime time for synthesis of learning. Past practice has shown that athletics will need the field even earlier on game days, and this is only magnifying these exact same issues. Finally, there was a possibility of morning practices if warranted. This would affect facility use with community ed, morning swim, physical education classes, setting up their learning space for the day, such as that. Secondly, I'd like to address the equality of transportation to before school activities. In frequently asked questions, it stated that there will not be before school activities. This will most likely continue at the end of the day. Students who have parents who can drive them places in the morning will continue to be able to do extracurricular activities, and those that don't will miss out. Some students will need before school care if both parents work. This will likely negate the sleep study that's present. Another concern in our building is the theater program, with the potential of theater either not existing, which is taking away an activity that many students are passionate about and care about and get them to school actually every day. It will have to move to the AM, which becomes an equity issue of who can get a ride, plus kids attending all 5 days negates the sleep study as well. All activities are important to students and success. Many students we know thrive on being a part of these amazing opportunities we have in place. So while it's not based on the athletics or the activities, these are things that drive our kids to do really well, and I've been a coach for many years to help with that. I fear we're going to lose both students and great leaders with all of these changes that are in place. Finally, I can't help but wonder what is the data that we're hoping to generate as a result of this. It seems at the beginning that we're talking about financial and budgets, and I get that. These time changes affect 70% of our students, families, and staff. So I'm wondering, will our standardized testing go up? With, what we're hoping for more sleep, are we hoping for more equitability? The sleep studies shows that younger kids and older kids, so 14 to 18, which doesn't hit the target middle school age of 11 to 13, which is what is actually at our school. Or is this the case, can the younger kids stay at the later time? Because it seems we're assuming that middle schoolers are going to get more sleep, but the way the new schedule is proposed, we could argue that kids will be getting less sleep, trying to balance activities. They're just going to start later, and with the later school schedule, they might be getting up to do or finish what they need to. I do appreciate you hearing all the sides of this huge issue. It's huge. It's not fun for anyone. Middle school is my passion. I love what I do. I love the district. I commute a long way to be a part of the things that are here. I'm just not sure that the sleep study hits the mark that's intended. I'm not sure all the negative consequences of school curriculum, facility use, and all the activities are going to fare through the changes that are taking place. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And after Patrick Dow will be Janet Jans. Welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Thank you for the time. Thanks for letting me speak. I'll be brief. My daughter's a kindergartner, and I've only been in Edina for about 1.5 years, so I'm somewhat new to learning how the process even goes. So I was kind of shocked to find out that OLG's buses were being used with the Edina public system. And I just feel that if a private school is going to be using public school busing, they should maybe be the first one on the list. I like the list, but I wish it would maybe start if OLG's using our public school buses. And I guess, again, I kind of digress a little bit. I was told that they pay for them and it helps our budget. I mean, if that is kind of the case, should we be looking at like busing other schools too to help our budget? I mean, you know, so that's just kind of, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, but so with that being said, I would like to maybe see with these times that the high school starting the earliest. So with all these times where I like, but then have OLG first if they're going to use our buses, then high school, and followed by then elementary schools. And my reasoning behind that, I just feel that if you're in high school, you're going to have more responsibilities after school. Sports, jobs, list goes on and on. And I feel you're going to need more time to do that at the end of the day. And getting out at 2:30 would allow that. If you get out, it might be tough for jobs. I mean, if you're having a job and had to do a sport, I find that almost impossible as a high school student. And my reference is obviously 17 years ago or whatever, but that just doesn't compute to me. I feel if you're older, you start earlier, and then it goes on from there. And that's just my reasoning on it, really right there. So one, I just don't understand the buses with being used, OLG. I mean, also even two, that obviously takes time out of every public school system. I understand that Normandale and OLG are kind of close, but again, I mean, OLG is a Catholic-backed church. They probably have tons of money where they can get their own buses. So I just don't get it. I need more, and again, with me, my daughter only being in kindergarten, me only being here in 1.5 years, I apologize for my ignorance on the subject. I'm just not getting it. So maybe I need more insight on that, but that's my reasoning behind it, and that's why I think maybe start times should be different with high school being first, so on and so forth. So, thank you.
Thank you. After Janet Jans comes Feroza Mehta. Welcome.
Good evening. It doesn't seem like it is on when you get here. When you're out there, you can hear it, but okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. And Chairman, thank you for the email and the message that you gave tonight thanking the teachers. It means a lot, and we truly appreciate that in this year of very intense challenges where we are trying to keep the students at the forefront. And that is why I am here tonight. It's wonderful to be thanked, but no one has asked us our opinions as middle school teachers. No one has come to leadership team or asked middle school teachers, you have given us a statement of experts, and yet you're not asking our opinion. And that is why I felt called to come tonight, to speak for middle school students based on the research that you are showing. And I agree with very strongly with one of our previous speakers that the health and the academic success of our students needs to be at the forefront. Some of the solutions that are suggested in admin and board papers present primarily a high school athletic focus over middle school academics. And the solutions and the challenges that would bring to middle school learners is very, very frustrating and disturbing to me. Having high school teams start to practice before middle school is done can deny students 60 hours of instruction by taking away 20 minutes a day. 20 minutes isn't a long time, but when it's a full school year, that's 60 hours of instruction. Another suggestion was to accommodate middle school teachers who coach at the high school. We can just change their prep time to the afternoon, which would change team schedules, which would reduce student success because teachers are teamed where they can be most successful. A simple change in schedule has the trickle-down effect of not helping our learners at all. Move advisory to the end of the day. It is best practice and has been proven, because we've done it both ways, and it's best practice to have advisory at the end of the day. Putting it, at the beginning of the day. Putting it at the end of the day gives it a throwaway quality, and the students' focus is not at all the same as it is with what we currently have. The proposal actually lists bus availability as a concern, but doesn't list the loss of middle school learning time and access to facilities. I find that disheartening. I agree that this decision should be based on the health and the academic success of our students, and I agree that we should respond to the research that is there. And that is why I would like to see discussion of having the middle school in the second tier being fiscally responsible with the three-tier system, and move the students that are here tonight that have difficulty getting out of bed, the 14 to 18-year-olds, to the later tier, where the research shows they should be, and not move the 10, 11, and 12-year-olds to the later time, which does not coincide with the research of the older teenagers. Edina makes decisions based on data. So I brought some data today.
So, excuse me, could you
absolutely
work towards a wrap-up?
sharing my percentage of grades from my period 1-2 classes at 8 o'clock to my 1 and 2 o'clock. There is a 7 to 9% higher grade level in the morning classes. They have greater completion time, deeper discussions with higher level thinking. There are more D's and F's in the afternoon with interventions needed. What will that difference be expanded at 4 o'clock? I really appreciate your time and your listening ears on this very, very central middle school issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And after Feroza Mehta will be Robert Jelinski. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Is this mic working? Okay, great. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. My son, Aiden, is in second grade at Creek Valley, and he has moderate autism spectrum disorder. He spends most of the day in the special education classroom. And my concern with elementary moving so early, and if it does happen, that from 2:30 till 6 o'clock, or whenever two working parents would be off of work, there's a 3.5 to 4 hour time window that we have to occupy kids with autism, and they need structure and scheduling. And I'm wondering if there's any way we can all work together and find a way to have appropriate after-school care for them. Right now, in Creek Valley at least, there are 5 to 6 students that do the after-school care at Kids Club, and they're assigned a paraprofessional. And it's not really a structured program, but they have the para following them around. And we were wondering, me and a couple other parents in different schools, because I'm on the Special Education Advisory Council, and I was just talking with the other parents, and there's a couple groups on Facebook as well with all like Edina special needs moms, and I'm just like running the idea by them, if this change does happen, how does it affect you? And most of the parents from the two who have two working parents are just like, we don't know how it's going to affect us, because right now with schools ending at 4, my boss has adjusted my schedule. I can go and pick my child up. But if there's such a large time window, then we're just concerned, is there a specialized schedule thing where our autistic students and Down syndrome students have something for them to do? So I did send a pretty long email to you guys last week. I know you're getting a ton of email, and the superintendent graciously called me and we spoke about it as well. But I would love to help you find a way to facilitate finding appropriate programming for the kids. So it's me, another lady, Kate Kowali, who's also on Special Education Advisory Committee. We would all like to come together and help you find a way to do it. And My husband had a really great idea. If you could do request for proposals from Fraser or Partners in Excellence or any other ABA provider, Fraser would be your best bet because they also serve kids with Down syndromes and other special needs. So they could give you a request for proposal, and you could work with their suggestions as well. So that would just be my request. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. After Robert Jelinski is Jani Shaw. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to be try to be reasonably brief because a lot of the points that I wanted to make were brought up before. So I'll just refer back to what's been said earlier for those. I just want to say, as everyone has said, and I know that it is true across the board, that obviously we are all most concerned with the performance of the kids and of their health. All of the kids need more sleep than they get. And of course, I'm sitting here, I have my 8-year-old right there, and so I'm worried about how early the younger kids have to get up, just as the older kids' parents are worried about theirs. So we're all a little bit in the same boat. I also just want to say, as a piece of perspective, that I've been managing nonprofits for about 25 years for a living. And let me just say that if I were coming in as a consultant, not that you've asked for one or need one, but I will say that you are trying to solve a financial problem in terms of the buses with a programmatic solution, which anybody who's spent considerable time in the nonprofit will tell you that that's really not best practice. The first way you have to look is to see if there is a financial solution to the financial problems. So if there is a way, just to say, to go back to figuring out a 2-tier, which I realize would have higher costs, and so there are other things that have to be dealt with there, we're really shortening the time span and trying not to affect the programming quite so heavily. Some specifics, just to say, again, these are the things that particularly affect me. I heard conversation earlier about the younger kids being out earlier hours, which means it's still dark. I also want to point out that that's not just when it's still dark, that's also when traffic is at a much higher level. Right now, my daughter goes out for the bus at about 10 minutes to 9, which frankly is kind of late, but the morning rush is pretty much done. And the amount of traffic that's going by is much less, and it's much safer. Going the other way is really worrisome for someone. Again, I also live on a major thoroughfare, so maybe I'm a little more worried about that than others might be. I also want to refer back to the comment that was made about people who have their kids in aftercare, as Julia is in aftercare, and if we're talking about adding at least an hour, probably more than that, to the other end of the day, just to say that we're solving one fiscal problem by causing another for a lot of working families, and that's real. It not only affects, just to say, the dollars for the care. There's also a mealtime spread that I was just thinking about as I was coming up that you should probably consider, right? Because in aftercare, I know that they get snacks and things like that, but you're now talking about what I assume is going to be a wider spread from mealtime in school till the time that they're done at the end of the day and are actually getting solid food. So these are just a few concerns that I wanted to bring up. I appreciate your time. You have my info if anyone has any other questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. After Jani Shaw would be Traci Mercado. Welcome.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
I am not jealous of you. I'm just going to say that. I'm just basically here to say I have a lot of trust in you guys. I have a lot of confidence in this district. I know that this is probably one of the hardest decisions, but I also know that no matter what happens, we as parents, we're going to be okay, and our kids are going to be okay. We're not talking about too dramatic of an issue in the grand scheme of things, but I trust you to make the decision. I'm not the expert on educational things, and that's why I want you to know I trust you. My only request is that I'm urging you to give people time with whatever decision you make. I've had conversations with teachers at Southview who I adore. I have a 7th grader there, and most importantly, I don't want us to lose staff over this. That's a huge scare of mine. We've worked really hard to get where we are in all of our schools, and I don't want to take any steps backward. So whatever decision you make, my family will support. But I'm just urging you to give it time, to let people take the time they need to make it work for their families. Also, maybe this is a great opportunity to have conversations with the athletic associations in Edina, maybe have some hard conversations about practices and times, and looking at rescheduling some of those dome times or ice times or something, and maybe use this as an opportunity to do a little bit better for our kids. And I know that myself, I know many other parents would be grateful to help with something like that. So I'm up here to say thank you, and that I trust you, and that we can do this no matter what happens, and there are parents out there that will help you. So thank you.
Thank you. After Traci Mercado will be Yurong Shang.
Hi, I'm Traci. I have an elementary age boy and a middle school age boy. So I've got two kids who will be affected by this decision. I wanted to thank you first for having this listening session. I think it says a lot about you wanting to represent the broad parent group. I support the recommendation to flip Tier 3 and Tier 1. The couple of reasons why would include that it does prioritize academics over necessarily extracurriculars. I think both are important, but at the end of the day, if you look at research and it talks about the type of hours of sleep that kids at this developmental stage need, I think it's the right decision if that's the only option. Ideally, I think a 2-tier or a 1-tier system would be great, but we know that that's not practical or financially feasible at this point. So I just wanted you to know I support that recommendation. I think it does take into consideration developmental stages of children. Middle school age kids, tweens, teens are having big developmental changes physically, cognitively. They're under more pressure. For many, this is the first time that they are experiencing more rigor and responsibility academically. And it is a time and place when they're really building a foundation to enter high school and develop those skills and habits. And so I appreciate you prioritizing, focusing on what's the best for that school day. And the extracurricular impact, I'm confident we can work out with before or after school alternatives. Also, I applaud you for using data to inform your recommendations and decisions. I think that's important. And at the end of the day, we're happy with the fact that we have this board that is listening to us, and we can't please everyone. So take everybody's feedback, and we appreciate what you're doing. And frankly, the families will adapt. You're not going to please everyone. We will all adapt, whatever the decision is that you make. So thank you for your hard work and dedication, but I do support the recommendation. It will be hard to get my elementary age child up early in the morning. However, I think with the level of academic pressure and workload that middle schoolers are under these days, their sleep is incredibly important to determining their ability to function well in school. The final note would be, I would just want to make sure that we are including staff feedback, because this is going to impact the teachers as much as the students, and I would hate to lose great staff over a timing issue. So I assume that that's being factored in, but from a student perspective, I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I think a lot of people before me have said many things that will challenge this recommended plan. One for all is all the complications when scheduling the activities for middle school students and high school students. And also, of course, the little kids now gets much earlier, so there's safety concerns and for the parents too. And on top of that, there's also financial concerns, because now the little kids gets to home much earlier than the older kids, siblings, who might actually be able to watch them if they get home with the current schedule. So I think I appreciate that the board is looking at the health of the students, I guess. So if that assumption gets realized, then it may be worth all the trouble that we have for all those schedulings and then even the financial impact on this. But I think that's a very big assumptions. For example, that we assume that just say, well, the middle school students just going to get up later, but they're not going to go to bed any different, but that may not be true. I have a sixth graders at my home. Now, he's not saying into any of the athletic program yet, but just for his health, as every doctors would recommend that he would need to some sort of exercise. So he does have swimming a few days in a week. Now, if he now right now he's utilizing the gap, the couple hours between after school and we both work. So after we both get home at about 6. He used that time for his homework and other academic things. But then if the school let out at 4:50 or so, 4:30, 4:50 or so, that basically gets him home and then no time for homework. And then when we get home and fed him, and he goes to activities and he goes to his exercise. And after he come back at about 8:30, then he started homework. Then he's just going to shift everything later. Right now, we can convince him to get onto bed about 10, maybe 9:30 when he finished stuff, 10:30 or so. But within that new proposed schedule, he basically had to shift that couple hours later after his exercise done, after 8:30 or so. Then he has no choice but to stay late. So it's not, I think right now, we as parents still have some power to convince them to go to bed a little earlier. But then with this new proposed schedule, there's basically, they have to. There's no other way around. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. The last person that signed up is Jacob Burning. So if you would like to speak tonight, then quickly fill out a form and provide it to Margot or Val. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks a ton for the opportunity. And I would say that having lived through last year, this is a significant improvement from last year. So appreciate everything that the board is doing. So I'm here representing myself, obviously, as well as my wife, because we operate as a team. So I'm going to read to you from from an email that we had sent to you. So dear Dr. Schultz and board, first, we would like to thank you for your service to the community and for all the work spent on the school start time discussions. Second, we recognize that this is not an easy decision with competing viewpoints and the inherent challenge of balancing parent and teacher concerns with logistics and financial considerations. Third, we've done a fair amount of research on the subject of elementary school start times and have personally experienced a variety of different start times. As such, we think we can offer a well-informed view of it. We have a third grader and a kindergartner at Concord Elementary. With that in mind, we are very supportive of earlier start times for elementary students. We have spoken with several teachers, all of whom believe early start times best support younger students' learning and development. At our previous school district in Colorado, our local elementary school start time was 7:35 and enjoyed broad community support. It is also very clear that views on this question of elementary start times are not uniform. While we recognize that start times have significant implications for family schedules and that some families benefit from later start times, we think it is best to center the decision on the constituents who matter most, students and teachers. When viewed through their eyes, it is clear that the prevailing evidence supports earlier start times for elementary children. Here's a sample of that evidence. I'm not going to go into the details, but one was the Wayzata School District. So I'm sure many of you have gone onto their website and gone through the process by which they made their decision and all the research they've done, both primary and secondary, to support their decisions. Ultimately, they landed very similar to your recommendation. Number two, Minneapolis Public School. So they conducted there's not as much, a lot of the school start times and the implications for sleep and academic performance have a bias in their samples towards middle and high school kids. There isn't a lot on elementary schools, but the Minneapolis Public School did have a 1998 study that supported earlier start times for elementary kids. While we are supportive, we know that many community members have or will express concerns regarding the earlier start times for elementary. While obviously 7:50 is only 10 minutes earlier than 8 o'clock, getting that start time to 8 a.m. might actually appease some of those people's concerns. I recognize, per our earlier comments, that you are balancing multiple factors, including financial and logistic needs. Some of the objectives we have heard from fellow parents include elementary kid safety, availability of after-school programs, and kids who stay up and sleep in. With all due respect, we think that these objections, while well-intentioned and well-informed, do not overcome the evidence in favor of earlier start times for elementary kids. This question has been raised by many school districts, such as Wayzata, and as a result, it has been debated well. We're not the first school district to deal with these questions. The conclusion many of the districts arrived at is earlier start times are better for elementary kids. Again, we fully support the earlier start times and we recommend voting for implementation in the 2018-2019 school year. And thanks again for the improvement in the process and the opportunity to speak.
We did get another person signing up, Robin Gould. By the way, this is again our last speaker, so got a minute or two to fill out a green form. Welcome.
Is this on? Okay,
Yes.
Hello. Hi, good evening. My name is Robin Gould. I have a daughter at the high school and a son who's at Southview, and we specifically moved to Edina this summer. My husband took a job in the area, and I guess I just came to listen because I'm a former middle school teacher myself and a parent of a Southview parent. But I guess one of my observations, especially as a former middle school teacher, is that I've seen very specifically at Southview this year, the school really working very, very hard to embrace the middle school concept. I think one of the purposes of moving, we did our research into the district of moving the 9th graders up to the high school is to consolidate their learning, but also to create a better social, emotional, and academic environment for the students at the middle school. By reconfiguring the day and having them start so late and having them end so late after school, the teachers have worked tremendously hard at the building this year to implement the personalized learning, the flex, their win time. If you now, after only 1 year of giving them an opportunity to do that, now you're going to change all of that on them. Then they've worked really hard in order to have all of these clubs so that everybody in middle school has a place to belong. If you have school end at 4:05 and kids getting home at 4:30, you are not going to have teachers and the staff be available to stay for homework club, for writing lab, and for math lab that you are making available to kids after school. If you make those things available to them, it's kind of like what somebody spoke to earlier, the equity to get those kids in earlier if you're not going to have buses, all of the opportunities we're creating for the middle school kids to send on to be academically successful at the high school, you're going to eliminate and pull out from right under them. But mostly I'm here, and I guess I decided to speak up, not only because how strongly I feel about embracing, if you want to embrace the middle school concept, is that it kind of breaks my heart that the teachers were not asked, or we did not even ask their input, or ask the staff their input into what they thought. They're the ones that we hire and that we trust with the kids every day, and to just not even approach them and ask them what their opinions are, how is it going this year, how are the changes, I think that's a little insulting, and I'm kind of disappointed in the district that we moved into, but I'm hopeful that with some of the recommendations tonight, or that you'll take it into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Caroline Correa. Welcome.
Hi. I know it was said already, but thank you. This is a big change compared to last year's process. And I think this is only the second board listening session that I've ever, since I've lived here, have ever seen. So I really appreciate that because it feels like you are definitely open to hearing from your constituents. I would encourage you, I support your recommendation, I would encourage you to utilize community ed as much as you can when you're making the schedule change so that parents have options for their students if they're flip-flopping their times because it's a great resource and you should be working together with them, obviously. And that's all. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So that completes our speakers who have signed up. So we do have another listening session on February 27th. And just to backtrack from that, on February 26th, we will have a school board meeting that this will be a discussion topic. So you could come to that meeting if you want. Hopefully we don't get everybody coming again with the same comments. But we also have a 6:30 session. So if people have specific questions that they have not gotten answered, you can submit your question in advance and then come at 6:30 and ask those questions, and there'll be more of a dialogue than what we're having tonight. Tonight is our listening opportunity, and the 6:30 session is more of a interactive session, and it is limited to 30 minutes, so we typically can cover 2 or 3 people. And I think on February 27th, we're also going to solicit questions in advance from people also to have a more interactive system. And with that, we're going to close the meeting. Thank you very much for attending, and have a good evening. We are adjourned.